Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Will Radio Part 30 in the ShovelWare Books Experiment and more. It's been a while since I've made any videos. I think my last video was in January, which was also a Will Radio. Now it's May 11th, 2026. So this is episode 0199 of Will's Guide to Programming Languages, Programming, Computation, and what have you. I was going to make a Will Radio on March 25th, so even that's a while ago. But for whatever reason, I didn't get around to it. So I had these things I was going to talk about. I had these notes or whatever. And I thought, well, I could just scrap those because some things have changed or I'd probably write it down differently. But I thought, let's go ahead and keep that. And then I just added some more notes at the end. So plenty of things to talk about. I mean, it's been, 4 months or something? No, a third of a year. Okay. So what was I thinking about on March 25th? I don't remember why I didn't make a video. I guess this should be shovel. I'm not sure why. But back into it. Okay. So I have ended the ShovelWare Book Pack Experiment. If you've been following along recently, I did an experiment where I was writing and releasing one book every 3 weeks. And I was going to do that for a year. And I don't even remember how many I released. I don't know. It wasn't for a full year, but it wasn't like 1 or 2. I think maybe I released like 7 or 8. I forget. Doesn't really matter. So I eventually stopped it. And the reason I stopped... Okay, so the reason I was doing it to begin with was I was having real trouble making progress on a book by myself. I've co-written 2 editions of the Reason Schemer, and I did write my PhD dissertation by myself, although that was based on a lot of work with other people, including work that ended up in publications with other people. So even though I wrote the text, I didn't just staple the papers together. It wasn't like I had done all that myself on my own. So I've been wanting to write a book on my own for a long time, and I've had trouble with various types of problems. So the ShovelWare Book Pack Experiment was an experiment sort of like I had the kiloTube YouTube video challenge a couple years ago, where I was suffering from perfectionism, sort of a Stanley Kubrick, let's do 78 takes of someone walking through a door type thing. So because of that, with the YouTube videos, I had spent a weekend trying to record a video, and I had gotten up to 80 takes or something like that. And then I just threw it all away. It's like I was disgusted with it. So I thought, okay, that's dumb. I'll never make any videos at that rate. And furthermore, I'll never become good at it because I'll never actually, want to do it. It'll just be such a pain. So I gave myself a challenge, which I announced publicly, which was to make 1,024 videos, 1 kiloTube worth of YouTube videos in a year, and which worked out to be like 3 or 4 videos a day. And I didn't make it for the full year for various reasons. Sort of the probably the main reason was it was surprisingly hard for me to find a quiet environment. I mean, maybe it's not that surprising. If you're making 3 or 4 videos a day, you might have to make some late at night or very early in the morning, right? Especially during a work day. So that just didn't work out with any sort of living arrangement with any other human being, where I didn't have like a soundproof studio where I could just make noise at any time, day or night. So, but even though I didn't get the 1,024 videos, it definitely got me unstuck. And I haven't made videos for a while now, but that's not because I'm afraid of making videos anymore or overly worried about perfectionism. It's just I've been working on other things. And I think these little breaks are probably good, actually. So I had a similar challenge. I thought, okay, well, I think my perfectionism is getting in my way. So let me try doing something similar to the kiloTube challenge, but with books. So I'll write and release a book every 3 weeks. And so I did that a number of times. So I went through a few months doing that. And so did it work? Well, it worked at least partly. So I was, releasing something I was calling a book every 3 weeks. And in general, they were very bad. They were quite bad. But that's fine, because the whole point was for me to get over my fear of releasing something that wasn't perfect. So for me to release something that wasn't good at all was fine. That was kind of the whole point of it. And then at some point, I kind of got sick of it, because I guess two things happened. One was, I think there was the danger of becoming performative, of just like, okay, just throw something over the fence every 3 weeks, which happened a few weeks, or I'd start, the night. It was supposed to be due when I went to sleep or something, and I'd start the book at 11 p.m. So what was that saying? If you wait till the last minute, if you always wait till the last minute, everything will always take 1 minute. So that was something I was doing. Yeah. So, it was a little sloppy Joe. And after a while, I felt like, okay, I'm getting used to releasing things that are not perfect. Well, that's good. But I'm also starting to get used to releasing things that are just like terrible. I probably don't want to get too used to that. So that was one pressure. And then the other thing was I started thinking about what I really wanted to write that wasn't going to be just kind of throwaway. It's not like the topics I was writing about were necessarily throwaway. In fact, I could probably turn one or more of them, and maybe all those books, into something reasonable if I put in the time and effort. But in any case, I came up with an idea or two for a book or books that I really wanted to write. So it seemed like at that point, the experiment had served its purpose. Okay. What did I learn? I learned some things. So one was I got used to some of the infrastructure and just making certain decisions and living with it that I'd had trouble in the past. So I learned how to use Pandoc to some extent. So I could have, like Markdown and I guess plain text and PDF, HTML, whatever, outputs. Yeah, I mean, it kind of works. I thought it was kind of ugly in a way, but it also had, like plain text or Markdown version that was accessible. So that was good. At the same time, I also kind of felt like I missed the nice typesetting that you can get from LaTeX or something like that. So towards the end, I was leaning towards, well, okay, if I wanted to do a book I really cared about, I'd probably combine those. I'd probably have like the Pandoc version, and I'd probably have like the really pretty version. In fact, if it's a book I really care about, I might even, have artwork and have a really nice hardcover version of it or something like that. But also have a version that was, accessible, plain text, whatever. I also had to make some decisions about, well, who do I dedicate the book to? And, what do I, how do I format things and all that? Like, I just had to make some decisions, which sound like little things, but I could tell you I would spend huge amounts of time. I would spend days and days, playing around with that sort of thing, like, fiddling with the title, fiddling with the typesetting of the subtitle and all those sorts of things I could spend forever on, partly because I wanted to be right, but partly I think it was just a way to avoid actually doing the writing. It's a lot more fun to play around with a dedication or something than to actually sit down and write it. So, I learned those sorts of things. And I thought a lot about what I would like to write. So I will call that a successful experiment for what it was designed to do, which was not to produce books worth reading. And if you read any of those drafts, my apology, thank you. Some people gave me feedback. Those are book drafts not really deserving feedback. So anyway. If any of you have read my partial products or initial drafts, I apologize. I'll try to be better and not shove shovelware stuff at you. If you want to come find it, that's on you, I guess. Now, one thing that I wasn't doing, that I had been doing before on this channel, was writing with the door open, right? So at one point in time, I had a Will Writes series of YouTube videos on this channel, and it was me trying to write. And it quickly turned into me dealing with, repetitive stress injury, or trying to find the perfect keyboard, or, switching to Dvorak, or, whatever goofy thing it was. And then also there was this challenge about, not making too much noise, right? The same problem as with the kiloTube challenge, where, I wasn't, and I'm currently not really in a living situation where I can just make noise anytime, day or night. So I ended up with these silent writing sessions. It was just me typing, I don't know, probably didn't make great radio or great TV, but that's what I did. But even that, I got a little, I didn't like it. Okay. I didn't like that, at least the way I did it, for a couple of reasons. So one was, actually, I spend a lot of time, if I'm writing for real, writing on paper, or curled up on my bed with my eyes closed, just kind of thinking about things, or going for a walk, those sorts of things. Those are critical parts of the writing process for me. And those are things I can't really capture unless, I want to turn it into a vlog diary type thing where I carry around a camera or my iPhone and record myself throughout the day writing. Another part was when I was recording a video of me writing, then I had the video that I was making in mind, at least to some extent, instead of just concentrating on the writing. There were a whole bunch of things like that. And also, for parts of the book, like when you're writing a book, who you give credit to, or if you're going to cite papers or, dedications, those sorts of things, I want to have a little wiggle room to change those, at least until I make the draft public. So felt like I had to make some decisions up front, maybe that I wasn't ready to make, or I could have left it out, but there were those sorts of things I was thinking about. So, I just eventually decided, okay, I'll just release this version online in GitHub repo. every 3 weeks. And towards the end, actually, I think I was going faster than 3 weeks, but like I said, these weren't the greatest books. So anyway, that's what I was doing. That's one of several challenges that I've given myself. When I took undergraduate algorithms course, I gave myself a challenge there, which was I was really into that course at the time. I was going back to college after working in the workforce for a while, and I was like super eager to do well. So I ended up being the number one student in that class. I just was like obsessed with trying to do well, because I figured like this is my chance, to do something with computer science, or I don't want to blow it. So I just spent all my time thinking about that. And so at some point I realized like, okay, I am the number one student in this class, but what does that mean? It means like maybe I can solve a problem 10% or 20% faster than the next student on average. Sometimes they would solve it first, but most of the time I could do it a little bit faster or something like that. But that at some point wasn't very interesting. It's like, okay, how do I make it more interesting to myself, more challenging? And what I came up with was, okay, for things like algorithm design problems, I will try to sketch out what I think the problem is intended to teach, and what is the expected algorithm design going to look like for the course for this particular problem, and then I was allowed to solve the problem any way except for that way. And to me, that's sort of the moment I started thinking like a researcher, which was, okay, forget whatever would be the standard way to solve it. I have to solve it some other way. And that was fun, and it turned every problem into effectively a research problem. So that's a technique I've used over and over again. And all you have to do is like with vibeKanren, the Advanced Dan class at Indiana University, Advanced Dan, the graduate class taught by Dan Friedman. He had a class that's called Advanced Dan, which is just like a small number of people who are really into PL, and he would hand out once a week some challenge problem, and then at the end of the week, we'd get together and we'd show each other our solutions. And, as a friendly rivalry, everyone wanted to show off that they had a cool and interesting hack or whatever. But what I decided to do, of course, was to do everything in vibeKanren. And this was vibeKanren that really was not ready, not quite ready for the challenge. So it really made everything hard. But a lot of interesting things came out of doing that exercise. So anyway, I like challenges like this, trying to find ways to challenge myself. So maybe there's another challenge for writing that I can come up with if I feel like I'm becoming stuck again. I'm not sure if I'm stuck or not right now. I feel like I'm making some motion, and maybe I'm actually making some progress, or will make some progress, but not sure. All right, so on March 5th, I was talking about a new book, A Relational Companion to Programming Languages. All right, so this is one reason I stopped the ShovelWare Book Pack Experiment. It's like, okay, this is cool. I want to write a book, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, certainly since I was back at Indiana. There are books which are talk about programming languages or programming language theory or aspects of programming languages. Classic books would be Essentials of Programming Languages, or Types in Programming Languages. Those are two classic books. There are plenty of others. And I've always wanted to go through those sorts of books, or at least the sort of main idea or materials, and do everything relationally. In vibeKanren or whatever, or maybe different variants of vibeKanren. Just explore the standard programming language concepts that you would get in a course at IU, for example. but do it relationally. And I was going to do code first. So meaning, instead of trying to write text first, I would try to work out the code for the chapters. And I would do Pandoc and LaTeX, like I was talking about before. Now, you can hear I'm speaking in past tense. It's not because I'm not interested in this book. I still want to write this book. And so, and I have made some progress on it. But there's another book I want to write, which, as you could probably guess, it's called An Imperishable Wonderland of Infinite Fun. And it's a different book than this, although they certainly have potential overlap. So those are the sort of the two books that I've been thinking about. I don't know how it will work out, and maybe this is kind of a sub part, the Relational Companion. Maybe that will end up being effectively a bunch of chapters inside the Imperishable Wonderland and an Imperishable Wonderland. I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. But I started on this book, and I wanted to write a chapter on lambda calculus and De Bruijn notation based on chapter 6 of Benjamin Pierce's Types and Programming Languages, that sort of take on things, and use it to be able to synthesize fixed point combinators like the Y combinator or Z combinator in vibeKanren. So I started doing some work on that. And I get stuck on a few things to try to really do it the way I would like to do it, where it's elegant and potentially efficient enough to run interactively in a nice way. I think I need to make some more progress. But I also started getting a little nervous in the sense that, okay, if I'm not careful, I will turn my writing problem or avoidance of writing into just like, okay, well, I have to do a full research project on every chapter. And then I probably have to write a paper on it. And then the paper has to be published and all these things. And so that also seems like a way to not write a book, if that makes sense. So that was one of the things I was nervous about. And I watched a YouTube video by Val, who has a bunch of kind of encouragement / reflection type videos, where Val is saying that you're ready to go. Like you don't really need more prep. At some point, preparation can be an excuse for not doing things. I think this was from Val. I don't know. I've been watching all these sorts of videos, and they've been recommending, YouTube's definitely recommending everything about writer's block or whatever to me. So yeah, I was thinking, okay, I've been getting a little nervous about that. What if I didn't wait until, everything was perfect before I could write a chapter? Because there's no guarantee I'll even be able to figure out that approach to synthesis. I've been trying to figure out how to do that for 20 years. So, if I could figure it out, great, but it's not, I shouldn't predicate the writing of my book on whether or not I can solve this research problem that I haven't been able to figure out for 20 years. So anyway, I want to make progress. And now it's not to say I'm not deeply interested in that problem and other problems. However, I'm going to take some encouragement and inspiration from the book Software Designed for Flexibility, How to Not Program Yourself into a Corner, which is really written, that's like the intellectual successor to Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs. And the idea of SDF is that book's really like a snapshot or a work in progress. Okay, it's not saying these are all perfect things, saying, okay, these are best attempts at things. currently. So I'm going to try to do that. Oh, what else was I thinking about in March? Claude experiments, vibeKanren, which I've started calling maybeKanren because maybe it works. I had this idea that in minikanren we were maybe slowing down in progress because we have a whole bunch of different features we've implemented individually. Sort of the whole community of people working on minikanren-ish stuff. We've got lots of versions of minikanren, lots of features and so forth, but we don't have one implementation that combines a whole bunch of the features. So combining the features or like constraint extensions or whatever can be tricky, and there's some ways you can try to go about it that maybe help some. But in any case, it seemed to me that this was largely a software engineering expertise and effort problem. Like we have people who are interested in doing research and writing papers and pushing the state of the art, going into new direction, whatever. But we have fewer people in the community who are excited about spending a whole lot of time doing software engineering effort, trying to combine features from a couple of implementations, let's say, in a really high quality way. So that to me was a big difference between, say, what we could do as a distributed group of people interested in relational programming versus what, say, a FANG company can do if they really want to do something, right? They have buildings full of programmers that could concentrate on the engineering aspect. However, now that Claude and Claude Code and these other frontier models are actually getting reasonably good at generating code in Scheme, Shea Scheme, Racket, whatever, and even tolerable at writing minikanren code as long as you give the ability to run Scheme in minikanren or run Racket in minikanren to the LLM. Maybe things are changing. So I've done a bunch of experiments to try to figure out, okay, so if I spend a week, let's say, playing around or a couple days playing around, can I get something useful or interesting or learn something from doing experiments, say with Claude? And I think the answer is yes. I can try a whole bunch of ideas and I could try combining things. And it's sort of also like a rubber duck type thing where, just by trying to explain things to the LLM, and the LLM will get confused or try to take shortcuts or whatever, try to cheat in various ways, and then trying to get the LLM back on the rails and trying to figure out if the tests actually make sense and, what does it really mean to combine these features is like a forcing function where it's just forced me to think harder about things where I thought, well, abstractly, here are two cool things that seem like they should go together. If there's a student at some point who wants to do a research project, maybe I'd point him in that direction. Well, with Claude, it's like, well, I guess I've got to figure it out to some extent. And even if I don't trust the Claude code or the output of those experiments in terms of having an artifact that I would want to use, just that process, going through those steps and thinking about it, often I'll realize, oh, yeah, there's something I missed. There's something I really didn't think about here that makes it either less promising or more promising or whatever. So, I've been playing around with that a fair amount. It is exciting. It's also very frustrating. but the LLMs are definitely getting way better at dealing with low code languages. At first, forget minikanren, couldn't even get Scheme, backquote to work. And now the models they can handle that pretty well. So, maybe the engineering effort issues are now more tractable. And, part of it is I know vibeKanren quite well. So, it's not really vibe coding in the sense of just like hitting autocomplete every time and letting the LLM do whatever it wants. It's more like I've got a pretty good idea what I want. And I also have got a pretty good idea what makes sense and doesn't make sense. And I want to try checking it a bunch of ways. So that's the other part of it is I don't really trust the LLM because I know it gets confused all the time. So how can I use the LLM in such a way that I can learn things, even though what the LLM is doing isn't very reliable necessarily. And I can also check things and also get to the point where if I wanted to show someone else, say, code, that I'm not just throwing slop at them, that it's much more refined than that. And so I've been playing around with different techniques. One technique I've tried is, say I wanted to add a feature to a vibeKanren implementation. Claude does it, writes tests, all this sort of thing. Like, how do I know that the code is any good? So and how do I understand it? Because maybe it's kind of complicated. And Claude also often will create code that's kind of more complicated than it should be. One approach I've tried is having Claude write a very high-level specification saying, here are the high-level structural changes that need to be made. Here are the new data structures or how the data structures are modified. Here's the high-level pseudocode for the algorithms, whatever it is. And having that as a document, it's not just like code that you would diff, but a high-level description, but pretty detailed, where the idea is to try to get to a document where if someone understood the original code and they knew vibeKanren and they were expert programmer, they could look at the document and they could implement the changes. So I take that document and then I have Claude take the original implementation and just apply the changes from that document and then try to pass the tests and all that. And that never works. But iterate it. And so have Claude, kind of fix up the specification until Claude can do that, where Claude can spawn a copy of itself or some agent that, without looking at the code, can look at the high-level spec in the original implementation and then implement the changes and then see if all the tests pass. And if they do. Now, I'm also assuming to some extent that Claude's not cheating, which maybe isn't a good idea. But the idea is that eventually you have some high-level design document that, in theory, you should be able to look at and see if it makes sense and maybe show to a human who knows, who maybe did the original implementation. So that's something I've played with. Oh, let's see what else. Return of the rotation. So this is something I always do, especially at the beginning of the year. Do I focus on like one or two things, or do I just like try to do everything? And okay, I'm learning ancient Greek and Japanese and German and French and Spanish, and I'll learn Korean and Russian all at the same time, and that's one of my hobbies, right? Or do I just focus on a few things? And so it's my personality being someone who's interested in everything, that I always want to come back to trying to do more things than I could really handle. So I guess at the time I was thinking, well, I could spend part of my time focusing on one thing really deeply, and then part of my time kind of ping-ponging around. Okay, well, that's not what I'm doing right now, but that may be, I don't know, maybe it's okay. So I keep trying to play around with that, and the truth is sometimes you just got to concentrate on one thing or a very small number of things, but there are other times where I play around with stuff. Like, I had many shots at learning programming or playing around with programming before I really got into it. So over longer periods of time, it's not necessarily bad to dip your toe back into a topic or area. Oh yeah, so I finally cleared out all my storage. I did this a while ago, but I've been going through the boxes. So I had like 140 boxes in storage. About 80 of the boxes, 70 or 80 boxes full of books. So I've been going through those and finding all sorts of treasures, and at least treasures to me. So some of the treasures were these mini games from TSR from the early 80s, and also Steve Jackson games from the early 80s, like pocket box games. I also ordered online this solo dungeon book. I was like watching the solo dungeon crawler or solo RPG, tabletop RPG. I didn't know that there were like solo RPGs, tabletop RPGs. Anyway, there's this whole solo area as well. So I got into that a little bit. So I got this thing called the Book of Dungeon. I think there's Bag of Dungeon first, and then there was Book of Dungeon. I played with that a little bit and immediately started thinking, well, how could I change the rules for that one? But also just going through the pocket box games again and the TSR mini games, just going through and reading some of the rules. And I've been looking at the second edition of Playing at the World. I read the first edition. It was pretty big book, and it's basically a history of Dungeons and Dragons, but it's a history of how to get, and how Dungeons and Dragons was arrived at, basically, going all the way back to like early history of military simulation and Kriegspiel and all this sort of thing. And from that, I've been interested in these like little mini games, and I loved these pocket box games when I was younger. Like Steve Jackson had Ogre and GEV, but there was also Car Wars, which I liked. Car Wars, I thought the original Car Wars, both the pocket box and I guess it originally came in like a Ziploc bag. That was a brilliant game because it was sort of like a board war game and a simulation and a role-playing game all in once. But also it had a design aspect because you could design your cars. So this was sort of a in the future there's no gasoline. It's like a Mad Max type thing. Okay, so you build these cars, and the cars can have tire slashers and oil slicks and turrets with flamethrowers and all that sort of thing, and then you fight it out. But you don't have to. You could be a courier or drive an ambulance called the Ambunaut, stuff like that. So you could do a role-playing thing, or you could design your own cars, or you could come up with your own gadgets and things like that. And there were all these rules for the weight of the chassis and how many power factors an engine had, and how fast your car could accelerate based on all these calculations. And so it became this design problem. How do you design your car? So some people would just design their cars. They wouldn't even play the game in terms of going out on the road with their cars or in an arena to fight it out or whatever it was. They would just design their cars. And I spent a lot of time designing cars. And that's when I sort of understood the idea of Pareto optimal or Pareto frontier. I didn't know those terms, but I started understanding that, oh yeah, this is like this multi-dimensional optimization problem. So I enjoyed that game a lot. I think for the size of the game and the box and the rules, that probably had more hours of interest and entertainment than any other game I've ever played. That sort of game's not really made anymore. I have been going to a few game stores recently, one in Cambridge, Mass, and one in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I was looking at kind of contemporary games, and certainly the sort of late 70s, 80s stuff that I grew up on doesn't, I don't know, maybe you can go find it somewhere, but certainly it's not in the game stores that I've seen. Anyway, just thinking about that, and these rule systems and design and minimalism and all that. I think designing a car in Car Wars and designing a version of minikandren, maybe they're not. I think they aren't that different in a way. There's like a sense of elegance. Yeah, any sort of design problem like that, I think, is similar in some sense. You have constraints, right? It's not just you can do anything you want in your car. If you usually have a dollar amount as your budget, you can't go above that. As a pragmatic matter, if your car weighs too much, it won't be able to accelerate. It's going to be a sitting duck. So there are all of these trade-offs are quite interesting. The Car Wars games kind of went overboard because it was very popular in the 80s. There was a magazine called Auto Duel Quarterly, which I subscribed to. And there were a bunch of extensions and play aids and things like that. At some point, I think it got a little over the top. It was just kind of too much. And so I like the Pocket Box version, or there was an extension called Sunday Drivers that I like. So maybe those two together. But I like the fact that like you could, throw this into an oversized pocket and you'd have a weekend of fun with your friends type thing. Musical devices. Yeah. So I got a new musical device. It's called a Synthstrom Deluge. It's from New Zealand. It's called a Deluge, but it's by Synthstrom, something like that, like synthesizer, Synthstrom Deluge. It's pretty cool. It's like I guess they call it like a groove box, but it's like Ableton or Logic in the physical format. And you've got a grid of buttons that light up RGB, and so you have sort of the times going left to right, and the buttons light up as time goes across. And it's a drum machine, but it's also like a synthesizer, and it's got a bunch of engines and stuff. So it's cool, but like one thing I like about it is it's very geometrical or something, and it's very direct manipulation. You can touch all the keys, and it's the sort of thing you could do in Logic, but with instead of a mouse you have your fingers, and somehow that feels different to me. And we've had some like sort of neighbor kids come over for various things, and they love that. They love the Synthstrom, the Deluge, but they also like the OP1 or the OP1 Field. They especially like the fact that you can record your voice and then play the keys, and it has different pitches for your voice like that. They love that, and it's fun watching the kids play with these things because they have no fear, right? They're just like, oh, that's cool. Here, get out of the way. Let me let me try it. Right? They're not worried about messing up. So it's good to just kind of remind me. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have to be so precious about it. Guitar pedal. I for a birthday present, I soldered up a guitar pedal. I still have another one I have to make, but yeah, my soldering skills were pretty. They've decroded. My eyesight's not as good as it used to be, but also I was like, wow, it's been too long. But that was fun. Okay, and then I had some YouTube channels and series I've been enjoying. So yeah, so one of the things that got me into this Deluge thing was Music Theory on the Deluge from Easy Tiger. That was fun. Yeah. And then the Deluge video manual. This is unofficial, but here's the series. That's pretty cool. Also, I had been getting back into StarCraft. Like by StarCraft, I mean StarCraft Brood War, StarCraft 1, the extension, the StarCraft 1, or StarCraft Remastered. Yeah, so day 9, let's learn StarCraft Introduction, why StarCraft is awesome. And day 9's got a whole series on Brood War. And I had been watching a lot of Artosis Artosis casts up to ASL, the Africa Star League, although now it's not called Africa anymore. But anyway, this is still called the ASL, which is the big Korean tournament for StarCraft 1. I haven't been watching that recently. I just got super busy and had deadlines and travel and stuff. So, but I still love StarCraft. So Japanese, there's this 80/20 Japanese channel that I like. And then Akiko Japanese Conversations, like this I like a lot. Easy Japanese news. So in terms of just listening, I really like this channel. What is this? Hanobano Japanese podcast, Cat Day. Okay. Well, I was into this when I made the video. Well, there's cat. I know the kanji for cat, and that's day. No. Neko no kyo? I don't know. Whatever. Kyo is like today, right? Kyo wa. Kyo wa. Okay. Daddy rolled a 1. Oh, yeah. So this is a great channel talking about D&D history. I've enjoyed this quite a bit. There are a couple channels I've liked. I'm really interested in the history of different types of innovation, and D&D is definitely an innovation. Like there wasn't anything quite like it before it was created. So I'm very interested in the history of it. How did that come about, and what was the milieu in which it was created? Like the Brian Eno talks about, instead of genius, there's scenius. There was definitely a scene in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and there was a scene in the Twin Cities in the late 60s, early 70s that led to D&D. It's very interesting. And also, like there wasn't just the rules, but people had to figure out how to play this game. And one of the most interesting things is for advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the 3 core rule books, Monster Manual and Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide, those came out separately over a period of like a year and a half or something. So, you imagine like you want to play D&D and you buy the Monster Manual. It's like, okay, great. What are all the rules? What are the rules for combat and for players and, advancing your character and spells? It was like, well, those haven't come out yet. So people would read the Dragon magazine and kind of argue about it. Yeah, I just find that interesting. Okay, another great YouTube channel, Joe Van Cleve, Typewriters and Office Supplies. I really like this channel. So he is a poet, writer, and he's been making videos since the 1980s, apparently. Just, I don't know, very cool, relaxing channel. And I love pens and pencils and all that, anything that writes or draws, and I like typewriters as well. So I've been watching. I haven't been watching it recently. I'll tell you why I haven't been watching it recently. if you can't guess already. But I was watching a lot for a while. The Map Reading Company, that's another great channel. These are also really fun videos. These are sort of like comfort videos. Those are kind of comfort channels. I can just watch those anytime. All right. So that was in March. Here we go. Here's today. So what was I going to talk about? One thing I came across, I think there was a link to this in Hacker News, is this blog post, Here Dragons Abound, is the name of the blog. And it's about the Forever Project is the idea. And so this is written by someone who likes making maps and I guess map algorithms or whatever for like fantasy maps. I don't know what they do by hand or what is automated. But in any case, they like making, D&D style or Tolkien style or whatever maps. They're really into that. And they talk about the forever project. Okay, so the idea is like, this is something you could do indefinitely. And I just like that idea. It's like sort of like, well, okay. I mean, obviously it's not really a forever project, but it's forever in the sense that it doesn't have a clear ending. It's just keep doing it as long as you can or want to. It's not going to stop. I mean, you'll stop working on it at some point, but it will be abandoned, not finished. Okay. So I thought that was cool. And that's how I'm thinking about this, an imperishable wonderland of infinite fun. Because I keep asking myself, what is that? I don't even know what it is. But I keep coming back to it. I've been looking at all my old notebooks. It's like every single one of my notebooks, I'll start off, okay, what do I really want to do? And blah, 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 blah. And I always come back. So, oh yeah, I really want to do this thing, whatever that is. Like part of it is like, yeah, maybe it's more like a project instead of a book or video series or whatever. Is kind of this long-term bigger thing. Like I said, in terms of writing a book, software designed for foundations, or making videos or anything, software designed for foundation, software design for flexibility. Software designed for flexibility is an inspiration. Okay, I may as well type that out. Ooh. Okay. You can see my typing hasn't improved. All right. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be perfect, right? These are like snapshots. And I was thinking about it also, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I'm not going to type out. I remember I first heard the one of the BBC radiophonic productions, or I guess it was the first one on a record at a friend's house for Hitchhiker's Guide. And to me, that was the right version. Then I read a book, called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I think that was a little different. And then later I heard another radio version, and then there was a TV show, and then there's a movie, which I haven't seen. I'm not going to watch the movie. But at the beginning, I would get like really irritated. It's like, wait, hold on. No, that's not what happens. This other thing happened. I remember, I'd listened to the record a bunch of times, or I'd read that book. And then eventually it dawned on me that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was Douglas Adams' way to tell jokes and to tell stories and make observations. It wasn't like there was one canonical version of everything. If there was going to be another radio production or a TV version or whatever, he'd feel free to change it up. So it's sort of in aggregate is the way to think of it, I think, instead of saying this is the correct way to do it. And it reminds me of, I saw the Grateful Dead in 91 maybe at the Shoreline Amphitheater in Mountain View, California. And they were playing Morning Dew, which was my favorite song. And I listened to several versions of the song, hundreds of times, I'm sure. So they start playing it live. It's like, finally, I'd seen the Dead in concert. I think it's my 5th time seeing him. I wasn't like a super Deadhead, like where I travel around everywhere, but, saw him like 5 times. So that was the last time I saw them. But they were playing the song. It's like, okay, well, great. It's on the water. It's, kind of in their home area, San Francisco area. So they start playing Mountain Dew, and I was there with some friends. It's like, great, this is amazing. And what I quickly realized was I couldn't enjoy it at all because I had this in my mind. I had listened to this one version like 100, 200, 300 times. And so I had this sense of anticipation where it's like, okay, they're going to play this note next, and they'd play something different, or it'd be a pause there. It'd be like, no, you're ruining it. It was so dumb. but at some point I realized, like, oh no, come on, I got to turn that off. But I couldn't. It was really hard for me to turn that off. And of course, it's like jazz, right? They were doing some level of improv. Apparently, there's this Kind of Blue album by Miles Davis and company, and apparently some jazz musicians decided, because this was supposed to be the greatest jazz album ever, that they would recreate the album note for note so well that you couldn't tell from listening to it which was the original Kind of Blue and which was the sort of cover version. And this was controversial because people were like, well, that's not what jazz is about. Jazz is about doing something new and improvisation. It's not about, complete mimicry. Well, that may be technically impressive. Anyway. And then the Aristocrats joke. There's that movie, The Aristocrats. The Aristocrats joke is like a schema of a joke, and the comedian fills that in. It's not like an actual joke. It's the performance part, and what you put in there is the actual joke. So anyway, that reminded me kind of just to relax a little bit. Like, there doesn't have to be one correct, imperishable wonderland of infinite fun, and it's got to be perfect. It's like, no, there's some things I'm interested in. Okay. I'm interested in relational programming. I'm interested in computation. I'm interested in programming languages and all sorts of other things like that. And I've got sort of a particular view of it. And also I want to learn more about it. So it's my way to kind of play around with it and share things I like, and also as like a forcing function for myself to explore things. So yeah, so that's really what I want to work on. That's my forever project. Yeah, so I already talked about this. Pandoc, nice typesetting. So if I have a book, I'm working on this book. I don't know when it'll see the light of day. I'm sure I will release it in scraps and pieces. I'm not sure when I'll start releasing bits and parts of it. Maybe I'll do a zine. Who knows? But I can have a Pandoc version, a nice typeset version, LaTeX, PDF, whatever, special hardback version. Sort of started with this idea of what the cover would look like and the cover art, and I was going to do all the cover art. Yeah, I still can. I spent all this time thinking about what the cover would look like, and I didn't spend any time writing. But I think that's just kind of like the forever project part of it. It's like, oh yeah, I've got this really strong vision of what I want the book to look like, but I also want someone to be able to read it in plain text. And I want it to be Creative Commons, open access, blah, blah, blah. So one thing I thought is maybe I'll have seasons for the book. I'll start working on this book. I've started working on it, but I'll say, season 1 is closing, and whatever fits in there by whenever I feel like is that season that goes in. And then, for season 2, I can go back and revisit and hopefully improve the writing and add some stuff, whatever. And adjudicate when the season's over, like soccer style. I still don't understand the soccer thing where they're like, okay, you have this many minutes, but then the referees just decide like how much time you've wasted and add some time at the end. How does that work? That seems so bizarre to me. Okay, so the reason I haven't been watching those videos in the typewriter YouTube so much anymore, although I still enjoy those, is that I finally pulled the trigger and I got off eBay a SCM Smith Corona Coronet Electric 12. So 12 is 12-inch platen. This is the size of it. So it's a portable electric typewriter. And I've got a picture of it. Let's see. Here it is. Oh, look at it. It's glorious. You can see that like this button here on the left with the arrow, like that's that's underneath. Something seems a little wonky about that, but I haven't decided I actually want to open it up to try to fix it. And also that's like the backspace button. That's for like erasing. I don't care. I don't care about erasing. There's no erasing. So it doesn't matter. So you can see this model is very interesting because it's like a semi-automatic. So it's electric, but the carriage return is still manual. You press this, and there are like these little switches in the back you can pull forward, and then the carriage return, like, slams to the side and all that. So it's portable. I like it. It's kind of a good size. It looks cool. Makes a nice sound. It's good to type on, but it's not too fancy. I was thinking for a long time about getting an IBM Selectric, either Selectric 1, Selectric 2, maybe not a Selectric 3. There's Selectric 3s, especially with like the correcting version of Selectric 3, I guess in some sense is the nicest thing you could get. But my understanding is that those really were designed for office settings where there'd be a service contract and those machines would be serviced every year. And so if you get an IBM Selectric today, I mean, they haven't been made for 40 years or something. Is probably going to need servicing, and if something breaks down, those machines are so complicated, like you're not going to be able to fix it yourself probably. So there's still a few places left that will repair them, but I started looking at the prices and I was like, oh my gosh. And they're big and heavy. They're not really portable. They're cool. I kind of grew up with access to a Selectric 2, so I used them a lot, but this one is just different. It's got a different feel. Like I know what it feels like to type on a Selectric. This one I could actually bring outside if I wanted to. It's not too loud. So yeah, it's just cool. I like the look of it. And it has things like you can set the copy number for doing the carbon copies, that type of thing, so anyway, and it has I've got a ribbon. I don't think this is the one. This is probably the ribbon that came with it, but I put in a replacement ribbon that's red and black, and you can switch here. Do you want the text to be red? Do you want the text to be black? And if it's in the middle, which isn't really supposed to be a setting, I think you get it like letters that are half red and half black, which is kind of funny. So anyway, it's just fun. So I want to be able to produce output. So anyway, so part of what I'm trying to do is just make generating text fun. You can also see there's no LLM, right? So I've been playing around with Claude for maybe Kanren and for work things, but when it comes to writing, no, there's not going to be any LLM anywhere near me for writing. I want to get better at writing and figure out how to write really and produce lots of text. And I don't want LLMs having anything to do with the writing for me, really, or the reading either. I just want to. Those are areas off limits, but especially the writing. I'm super protective about that. So, what else for making writing fun? JetPens, which if you don't know is a store in California that they sort of specialize in Japanese stationery. For fountain pens, I like JetPens and Goulet pens. Those are both good. But they have some kits. So they have pencil kits. So I was watching a Mathematical Adventures channel, and there was an episode called About Pencils. This person who's largely like teaching themselves, graduate math, excuse me, has, uses pencil for everything. And he's got a video on the different types of pencils. So I learned about this particular pencil, which also the Always Analog YouTube channel has a video about it. It's a Mitsubishi Pencil Company 4563 2B. That's the hardness. Triangular pencil. So the pencil is actually triangular, and it's a little bigger than a regular pencil. So like one of my pencil sharpeners won't work with it. But it's supposed to be especially dark, and it's just a nice pencil. So I got a couple of pencil kits and fancy Japanese pencil sharpeners, and I also got a few kits, a few boxes of these triangular pencils, which are way overpriced. Unfortunately, JetPens doesn't sell those, but I acquired those through another online retailer, which I don't like advertising which one that is. But if you search for it, you'll find it. So I've been playing around with those. I have to admit the pencils haven't really done it for me to the same extent as like the fountain pens or the typewriter. But here's something that has done it for me, which is WordStar 4.0 Professional for MS-DOS or PC-DOS. Using DOSBox X on the special writing account for my Apple Silicon MacBook Pro. Now, this isn't my special writing account, but this is DOSBox X on my regular account. And here we go. We got WordStar 4. I can create a new doc. Let's see. Example. Can't find it. Create it. There we go. And hello world. There we go. I can make it have some more space. This is what George R.R. Martin uses to write the Game of Thrones books and all of his books. It's 1988. No frills, but actually as a word processor is really nice. I quite like it already. So, yeah. All right. A couple quotes. However you can. That's from the movie Predator. Lawrence Fishburne's character. How do you take out the predators? However you can. It's how do I finish this book, or how do I not really finish. How do I make progress? However I can. Here's another quote I've seen that I really like. Things of quality have no fear of time. Urgency versus fun. Calm yourself, Doctor. Captain Kirk to Bones. Star Trek 3. Also, I've decided that what I'm working on isn't for super experts in BakeNRen. They already know this stuff, so I'm not worried about it. I missed making the Will radios, and I might make some other series. All right, that's it for now. Take care.